The dust from the Wyoming plains had barely settled on Catherine Wells's black mourning dress when she realized the twin girls clinging to her skirts were now her entire world, and she would die before she let them feel one moment of the abandonment that threatened to crush her own heart. It was April of 1876, and the spring wind carried more than just the promise of new grass across the frontier. It carried the weight of loss so heavy that Catherine sometimes wondered if she would simply collapse under it. Her brother Thomas and his wife Margaret had been dead for 3 weeks, victims of a sudden fever that swept through their homestead with merciless efficiency, and now Catherine stood in the small cabin they had built with their own hands, looking at 2 pairs of identical blue eyes that trusted her completely. The twins, Emma and Eleanor, were 4 years old, and they did not yet understand that their parents were never coming back. They asked for their mother every morning and their father every night, and each time Catherine had to swallow the sob that threatened to escape her throat and explain again, as gently as she could, that Mama and Papa were with the angels now. She had come from Boston 6 months earlier to help Margaret through a difficult pregnancy that never was, staying on because Thomas had written that he needed her help with the expanding ranch. Now that ranch was hers, along with 2 little girls who needed her more than anything in the world. Catherine had never complained, not once. She had written to her aunt in Boston to explain that she would not be returning, had sorted through Thomas and Margaret's belongings with steady hands, had learned to cook beans and bacon and biscuits because that was what she could afford and what the girls would eat. She had taken over the small garden Margaret had started, had learned to milk the 2 cows Thomas had purchased the year before, had figured out how to mend the chicken coop when a coyote tried to break through. She was 23 years old, and she had expected to marry a banker's son and host tea parties, but life had other plans, and she would not waste time mourning what could have been when 2 little girls needed her to be strong. The problem was that the ranch, if you could even call it that, was failing. Thomas had been a dreamer, not a rancher, and he had invested in cattle he could not afford and land he could not manage. The mortgage payment was due in 2 months, and Catherine had no idea how she would make it. She had sold what she could, had taken in mending from the women in town, had stretched every penny until it screamed, but it was not enough. She needed help, but her pride, that Boston pride her mother had instilled in her, would not let her ask for it. That was her situation on the bright May morning when Cole Tanner rode up to her property line and found her trying to fix a section of fence that had collapsed in the night. She had been at it for 2 hours, her hands blistered and bleeding, her hair escaping from its pins in wild auburn tendrils, her dress torn at the hem where she had caught it on a nail. The twins were playing nearby, making daisy chains and singing a song their mother had taught them, and Catherine was so focused on driving the fence post into the hard ground that she did not hear the horse approach until a deep voice said, "Ma'am, you are going to break your back doing it that way." Catherine spun around, her heart hammering, one hand going instinctively to the rifle she had propped against the fence. She found herself looking up at a man on a bay horse, and her first thought was that he was too handsome for his own good, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, gray eyes that seemed to see right through her, and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from granite. He was perhaps 26 or 27, dressed in worn denim and a leather vest, a black hat pulled low over his eyes, and he sat his horse with the easy grace of a man who had spent his entire life in the saddle. "I am managing just fine, thank you," Catherine said, her voice colder than she intended. She had learned in the past 3 weeks that men on the frontier saw a woman alone and assumed she was either desperate or available, and she was neither. The man swung down from his horse in one fluid motion, looping the reins over the fence post she had just managed to set. "No offense, ma'am, but you are not managing fine. That post is going to fall over the first time a cow leans on it. You need to dig deeper and set it with rocks." "I am aware of proper fence construction, mister." Catherine let the sentence hang, not bothering to hide her irritation. "Tanner, Cole Tanner. I have the spread about 5 miles east of here." He gestured vaguely toward the horizon. "I knew your brother. Good man. I was sorry to hear about what happened to him and his wife." Catherine felt her anger deflate like a punctured bladder. "Thank you. Thomas spoke of you. He said you were the only rancher in the territory who did not treat him like an Eastern fool. Cole smiled, and it transformed his face from handsome to devastating. Well, he was an Eastern fool, begging your pardon, but he was a good-hearted one. He helped me round up some strays last fall when my hired man broke his leg, and he would not take a penny for it. I owe him a debt. You owe him nothing, Catherine said firmly. He would have helped anyone who needed it. That was his way. Maybe so, but I am the one he helped, and I pay my debts. Cole walked over to the fence post and pulled it out of the ground as easily as if it were a toothpick. If you will allow me, I can have this fence fixed properly in about an hour. Catherine opened her mouth to refuse, to tell him that she could handle her own problems, but then Emma called out, "Miss Kathy, Ellie hit me." And she turned to see Eleanor, the more spirited of the twins, standing over her sister with a guilty expression. The distraction was enough to make her realize how tired she was, how her back ached, how her hands throbbed, and how much she wanted to simply sit down and cry. "I cannot pay you," she said, hating the admission, but knowing it had to be made. Cole was already digging a deeper hole with the efficiency that spoke of years of experience. "Did I ask for payment? I said I owed your brother a debt. Let me help you." Those words, simple and direct, broke something inside Catherine. She had been so strong for so long, had held everything together through sheer force of will, and now this stranger was offering help with no expectation of anything in return. It was too much. She felt tears prick her eyes and turned away quickly, calling to the twins, "Girls, come here. We're going inside for a moment." "But we are playing," Eleanor protested. "Now," Catherine said, and something in her voice made both girls scramble to their feet and run to her side. She took their hands and led them toward the cabin, feeling Cole's eyes on her back, but not daring to look at him for fear he would see her tears. Inside the cabin, she poured water for the girls and set them at the small table with the slate and chalk she had bought in town, telling them to practice their letters. Then she stood at the window, watching as Cole Tanner worked on her fence with smooth, economical movements. He had removed his vest and rolled up his sleeves, and she could see the play of muscles in his forearms as he lifted rocks and tamped down dirt. He worked like a man who knew the value of a job done right, and despite herself, Catherine felt a flutter of something she had not felt in a very long time. It was not quite attraction, not yet, but it was the awareness that he was a man, and she was a woman, and that was dangerous territory for a woman alone. By the time she went back outside with a jar of cool water from the well, Cole had fixed not just the broken section, but had reinforced two other weak spots she had not even noticed. He accepted the water with a grateful nod, drinking deeply, and she tried not to notice the way his throat moved as he swallowed. "Thank you," she said, meaning it. "This would have taken me all day, and I still would not have done it as well as you did." Cole handed back the jar and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "You are welcome. Your brother would have done the same for me." He hesitated, then said, "I know it is not my place to ask, but are you planning to stay? I heard some talk in town that you might be going back east." Catherine felt her spine stiffen. The gossips in town have nothing better to do than speculate about other people's business. "Yes, I am staying. This is the girls' home, and I will not take them away from everything they know." "That is good to hear," Cole said, and he sounded like he meant it. "The territory needs more women like you, willing to stick when things get hard." "I have no choice," Catherine said more harshly than she intended. "Those little girls lost their parents. They will not lose their home too, not if I can help it." Cole studied her for a long moment, his gray eyes thoughtful. "You do have a choice. You could sell this place, take the money, and go back to wherever you came from. The fact that you're not doing that says something about your character." Catherine felt heat rise to her cheeks and was not sure if it was from anger or embarrassment. "My character is none of your concern, Mr. Tanner." "Cole," he corrected gently, "and you are right, it is not. But I'm going to make it my concern anyway because I liked your brother and I do not like seeing his sister struggle when I can help. I told you I cannot pay you. And I told you I'm not asking for payment." Cole walked to his horse and swung into the saddle. I will be back tomorrow to check on those cows of yours. From what I could see from the road, they are not looking too healthy. Mr. Tanner, I do not need your charity. Good, because I am not offering charity, I am offering help. There is a difference. He touched his hat brim in a gesture that was pure Old West courtesy. Good day, ma'am. Tell the little ones I said goodbye. He rode off before Catherine could formulate a response, leaving her standing in the yard with a mixture of gratitude, irritation, and something else she did not want to examine too closely. She went back inside to find the twins had abandoned their slate and were instead playing with the rag dolls Margaret had made them. Emma looked up with her mother's smile and said, "Is that man going to be our new papa?" Catherine felt like she had been punched in the stomach. "No, sweetheart. He's just a neighbor being kind." "But we need a papa," Eleanor said matter-of-factly. "Sally at church has a papa, and he gives her peppermints." "We do not need a papa," Catherine said, sitting down at the table and pulling both girls onto her lap. "We have each other, and that is enough. Do you understand?" Both girls nodded, but Catherine could see the doubt in their eyes. They were too young to understand that the world was not fair, that sometimes you lost everything you loved, and that the only thing you could do was keep going. She hugged them tightly, breathing in the scent of their hair, and promised herself that she would give them the best life she could, even if it killed her. Cole Tanner did come back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. He brought medicine for the cows, which he said he had extra of. Though Catherine suspected he had bought it specifically for her, he showed her how to check their hooves for infection and how to tell if they were getting enough water. He fixed the sagging porch step, repaired the leak in the roof, and oiled the squeaky hinge on the barn door. He did all of this without fanfare, arriving early in the morning and leaving before supper, always refusing her offers of a meal, always tipping his hat and riding away before she could properly thank him. Catherine knew she should put a stop to it, should tell him that his help was not needed, but the truth was that she needed it desperately. The ranch was in worse shape than she had realized, and every day brought some new crisis that she had no idea how to handle. Cole seemed to sense what needed to be done before she even asked, and he did it with a quiet competence that both impressed and unnerved her. The twins adored him. Emma, the shy one, would peek at him from behind Catherine's skirts and giggle when he winked at her. Eleanor, bolder, would follow him around asking endless questions about horses and cows and whether he had ever seen a real Indian. Cole answered every question with patience, treating them like they were adults whose opinions mattered, and Catherine could see them blossoming under his attention. It was dangerous, she knew. Dangerous for the girls to get attached to a man who would eventually leave, and dangerous for her to start depending on someone who owed her nothing. But she could not seem to help herself. Cole Tanner had become a fixture in their lives, as regular as the sunrise, and she found herself listening for the sound of his horse in the mornings and feeling a pang of disappointment on the rare occasions when he did not show up. 3 weeks after their first meeting, Cole arrived with a wagon full of lumber and announced that he was going to build a proper chicken coop. Catherine, who had been trying to keep the chickens contained with wire and hope, protested that it was too much, but Cole just shook his head and started unloading the wood. "Those chickens are going to get eaten by coyotes if you do not give them better protection," he said. "Besides, I need to use up this lumber before it warps. You are doing me a favor by taking it off my hands." It was a transparent lie, but Catherine did not have the energy to argue. She was exhausted from another sleepless night spent worrying about the mortgage payment, which was now only 3 weeks away. She had counted her money a dozen times, had looked for anything else she could sell, but she was still $40 short. $40 might as well have been $400 for all the chance she had of raising it. She must have looked as desperate as she felt, because Cole paused in his work and said, "Catherine, what is wrong?" It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it made her throat tighten. "Nothing, I'm fine." "You are a terrible liar." Cole set down the hammer and walked over to where she stood on the porch. "Talk to me. Maybe I can help." "You have already helped more than I can ever repay," Catherine said, looking down at her hands to avoid his eyes. "I cannot ask for anything more." "You are not asking? I am offering." His voice was gentle, but there was steel underneath it. Tell me what is wrong." And so she did. She told him about the mortgage, about the money she did not have, about the very real possibility that she would lose the ranch and have nowhere to take the girls. She told him about her fears and her failures, about the nights she lay awake trying to figure out how to make everything work. She told him things she had not told anyone, and when she was done, she felt both lighter and more ashamed than she had in weeks. Cole listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, and Catherine braced herself for the pity she knew was coming. But when he finally spoke, his voice was firm and businesslike. "I will lend you the money." "No." The word came out sharper than she intended. "Absolutely not. I will not be in debt to you or anyone else. It would be a loan, not a gift. You can pay me back when you have it." "And when will that be? I can barely feed us, let alone pay back a loan." Catherine shook her head, feeling tears of frustration prick her eyes. "I will figure something out. I always do." "Catherine." Cole reached out and took her hand, and the touch sent a shock through her entire body. His hand was rough and calloused, warm and strong, and it engulfed hers completely. "You do not have to do this alone. Let me help you." There were those words again, the ones that had broken through her defenses the first day they met. "Let me help you." Such simple words, but they carried the weight of everything she wanted and everything she was afraid to accept. She looked up at him, at his gray eyes that were full of concern and something else, something that made her heart beat faster, and she felt the last of her resistance crumble. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" Cole smiled, that devastating smile that made her forget how to breathe. "Because you need help. Because your brother was a good man who deserved better than what life gave him. Because those little girls need a home. And because—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Because I care about what happens to you." Catherine felt the world tilt on its axis. She had told herself that Cole was just being neighborly, that his help meant nothing more than Christian charity. But the look in his eyes told her otherwise. He cared about her, not just about the girls or the ranch or fulfilling some imagined debt to Thomas, but about her. The realization was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "I do not know what to say," she managed. "Say yes. Say you will let me help you keep this ranch, and that you will pay me back when you can, and that you will stop trying to do everything by yourself." His thumb stroked across her knuckles, a gesture so tender it made her want to cry. "Please, Catherine." She should say no. She should pull her hand away and thank him politely and send him on his way. She should protect her heart and the girls' hearts from the inevitable pain that would come from depending on someone. But she was so tired of being strong, so tired of fighting every battle alone, and the warmth of his hand on hers felt like a lifeline in a stormy sea. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, all right. I will accept your help. But I will pay you back every penny if it takes me the rest of my life." Cole grinned, and it was like the sun coming out from behind a cloud. "I have no doubt you will. You are the most stubborn woman I have ever met." "I am not stubborn. I am determined." "Same thing, just spelled different." He released her hand, and she felt the loss of his warmth like a physical ache. "I will bring the money tomorrow. In the meantime, I have a chicken coop to build." He went back to work, whistling a cheerful tune, and Catherine stood on the porch watching him, her hands still tingling from his touch. The twins came running around the corner of the cabin chasing a butterfly, and Emma called out, "Miss Kathy, can Mr. Cole stay for supper?" Catherine looked at Cole, who had paused in his work and was watching her with raised eyebrows. She knew she should say no, should maintain some distance, but the words that came out were, "Would you like to stay for supper, Cole?" "I would like that very much," he said, and the warmth in his voice made her stomach flutter in a way that had nothing to do with hunger. That night they sat around the small table eating stew and biscuits, and for the first time since Thomas and Margaret had died, the cabin felt like a home instead of a prison. Cole told stories about his adventures as a cowboy, carefully editing out the more dangerous parts for the girls' sake, and they hung on his every word. Eleanor sat on his lap, playing with the buttons on his shirt, while Emma leaned against Catherine and sucked her thumb, something she only did when she was completely content. After supper, Catherine put the girls to bed while Cole waited on the porch, and when she came back out, he was leaning against the railing looking up at the stars. The night was cool and clear, the sky a blanket of diamonds, and Catherine wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and stood beside him. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. I do not just mean the money or the work. I mean for making the girls smile again. They have been so sad, and I did not know how to reach them." "You are reaching them just fine, Cor," Cole said. "They are lucky to have you." "Sometimes I wonder if I'm enough. I am not their mother. I do not know the songs she sang or the stories she told. I am just their aunt who happened to be here when their world fell apart." Cole turned to face her, his expression serious. "You are not just anything. You are the woman who gave up her life to take care of two little girls who needed you. You are the woman who works herself to exhaustion every day to give them a home. You are the woman who loves them enough to sacrifice everything for their happiness. That is not just. That is everything." Catherine felt tears slide down her cheeks, and she did not try to stop them. "I am afraid I'm going to fail them. I am afraid I am not strong enough or smart enough or capable enough." "You are all of those things and more." Cole reached out and gently wiped her tears away with his thumbs, his hands cradling her face with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "You are the strongest woman I have ever met, Catherine Wells, and I am in awe of you." She looked up at him, at his face shadowed in the starlight, and felt something shift inside her. It was not just gratitude or relief or even friendship. It was something deeper, something that scared her with its intensity. She had known this man for less than a month, but she felt like she had known him forever, like he was a piece of herself she had not known was missing until he appeared. "Cole," she whispered, not sure what she was asking for, but knowing she needed something. He seemed to understand. He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to pull away, but she did not move. When his lips touched hers, it was gentle and sweet and perfect, a kiss that promised everything and demanded nothing. Catherine melted into him, her hands coming up to grip his shirt, and for a moment the world consisted of nothing but the two of them and the stars overhead. When they finally pulled apart, Cole rested his forehead against hers and said, "I should go." "Yes," Catherine agreed, but neither of them moved. "I do not want to do anything that would harm your reputation or make things difficult for you. I know. But I want to court you properly if you will let me. I want to come to dinner and take you to church socials and let the whole territory know that I'm serious about you." Catherine pulled back to look at him, her heart pounding. "Cole, I come with two little girls and a failing ranch and more problems than you can count. Are you sure that is what you want?" "I have never been more sure of anything in my life." He kissed her again quickly this time, and then stepped away before she could respond. "Think about it. I will be back tomorrow with the money for the mortgage. Good night, Catherine." He mounted his horse and rode off into the darkness, leaving Catherine standing on the porch with her fingers pressed to her lips and her heart singing a song she had thought she would never hear again. She went inside and checked on the girls, who were sleeping peacefully in the bed they shared, and then she lay down on her own narrow cot and stared at the ceiling, reliving every moment of the evening. Cole Tanner wanted to court her. Cole Tanner, who was handsome and kind and capable, who made her laugh and feel safe and believe that maybe, just maybe, everything would be all right. It was too much to process, too much to hope for, but she could not seem to stop the smile that spread across her face. For the first time in months, she fell asleep without worrying about the future, and she dreamed of gray eyes and gentle hands and kisses under the stars. True to his word, Cole arrived the next morning with the money for the mortgage, carefully counted out and wrapped in a piece of oilcloth. Catherine took it with shaking hands, overwhelmed by the reality of what he was doing for her. $40 was a fortune to someone like her, and she knew it was not a small sum even for someone with Cole's resources. "I will pay you back," she promised. "I do not know how or when, but I will." "I know you will," Cole said calmly, "but there is no rush. Focus on keeping this place running and taking care of the girls. The money will still be owed whenever you have it." "You're too good to us." "I am selfish," Cole corrected with a grin. "I want you to stay in the territory, which means I need to help you keep the ranch. See? Purely selfish motives." Catherine laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. "If that is selfish, then I hate to think what you are like when you are being generous." "You will find out," he said, and the promise in his voice made her blush. That afternoon, Catherine rode into town with the girls to pay the mortgage, and the look on the banker's face when she handed over the money was worth every moment of worry. He had clearly expected her to fail, had probably already been planning how to sell the property, and his disappointment was almost comical. "This brings you current through the end of June," he said stiffly, counting the bills with obvious reluctance. "The next payment will be due July 1st. "I am aware," Catherine said with a smile that was all teeth. "You will have that payment as well, Mr. Henderson. You can count on it." She left the bank feeling victorious and impulsively stopped at the general store to buy peppermints for the girls and a new shirt for Cole, to replace the one that had torn when he was fixing her fence. The storekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, raised her eyebrows when Catherine asked for a man's shirt, and Catherine could practically see the gossip forming in the woman's mind. "It is for Mr. Tanner," Catherine said firmly. "He has been helping out at the ranch, and I want to repay his kindness." "I see," Mrs. Patterson said in a tone that suggested she saw quite a lot. "Mr. Tanner is a good man. You could do much worse." "I am not doing anything," Catherine protested, feeling her cheeks heat. "He is simply being neighborly." "Of course," Mrs. Patterson agreed, but her smile said otherwise. "That will be $2.30. Catherine paid for her purchases and left the store, knowing that by nightfall the entire town would be buzzing with speculation about her and Cole. Part of her was mortified, but another part, a part she had not known existed, was secretly pleased. Let them talk. Cole Tanner was a good man, and if people wanted to link her name with his, she could think of worse fates. That evening she gave Cole the shirt, and the look on his face made the gossip worthwhile. He held it up, examining the stitching, and then said, "You did not have to do this." "I wanted to. Consider it payment for all the work you have done." "This is too fine a shirt for payment. This is a courting gift." He looked at her with those gray eyes that seemed to see into her soul. "Does this mean you have thought about what I said last night?" Catherine took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "Yes, and if you are serious about courting me, then I accept." The smile that spread across Cole's face was like nothing she had ever seen. He whooped loud enough to startle the chickens, then picked her up and spun her around, making her shriek with laughter. The twins came running to see what the commotion was about, and Cole set Catherine down and announced, "I'm going to be courting your Aunt Catherine. What do you girls think about that?" "What is courting?" Emma asked, looking confused. "It means he is going to try to make her fall in love with him," Eleanor said with the confidence of a 4-year-old who thought she knew everything. "And then they will get married and have babies." "Eleanor," Catherine gasped, mortified, "that is not... We are not... It is too soon to talk about such things." But Cole was laughing, a deep, rich sound that made her want to laugh too, despite her embarrassment. "Your niece is a romantic," he said. "Nothing wrong with that. She is 4 years old. She should not be thinking about such things." "Why not? I'm thinking about them." Cole's eyes met hers, and the heat in them made her forget how to breathe. "I am thinking about them quite a lot, actually." Catherine knew she should scold him, should tell him that such talk was inappropriate, but she could not seem to form the words, because she was thinking about them too, about what it would be like to be Cole's wife, to wake up next to him every morning, to have children with his gray eyes and her auburn hair. It was too soon, too fast, too everything, but she could not seem to help herself. Over the next few weeks, Cole courted her with a determination that was both flattering and overwhelming. He took her to the church social, where he danced with her until her feet ached and glared at any man who looked at her too long. He brought her wildflowers, which the twins promptly commandeered for their own bouquets. He helped her plant a bigger garden, turning over the soil with steady strokes while she followed behind with seeds. He taught the girls to ride on his gentle mare, holding them securely while they squealed with delight. And he kissed her. Every chance he got, he found excuses to steal kisses, sometimes quick and playful, sometimes slow and deep, always leaving her breathless and wanting more. Catherine, who had always prided herself on her propriety, found herself initiating those kisses as often as he did, pulling him behind the barn or into the shadows of the porch for stolen moments of intimacy. The ranch began to thrive under their combined efforts. Cole taught her how to manage the cattle, how to read the weather, how to negotiate with the buyers who came through looking for beef. He introduced her to other ranchers, men who had initially dismissed her as a foolish woman playing at farming, and she won them over with her intelligence and determination. She started turning a profit, small at first but growing, and for the first time she allowed herself to hope that she might actually make a success of this life. The girls flourished too. Emma came out of her shell, chattering away to anyone who would listen, while Eleanor's wild energy found an outlet in helping with the ranch chores. They started calling Cole Uncle Cole, which made Catherine's heart squeeze with emotion every time she heard it. They were becoming a family, the four of them, and it was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. In early July, Cole took Catherine into town for the Independence Day celebration, leaving the girls with his housekeeper, a kind older woman named Mrs. Murphy, who had been with him since his parents died. It was the first time Catherine had been away from the twins since she had taken them in, and she felt guilty and relieved in equal measure. The celebration was everything a frontier 4th of July should be. Speeches and races, a pie-eating contest and a dance. Cole won the horse race, accepting his prize of a new saddle blanket with a modest smile, and Catherine felt a surge of pride that this man, this wonderful man, had chosen her. As the sun set and the fiddles started up, Cole led her to the makeshift dance floor and pulled her into his arms. They swayed together under the lantern light, and Catherine felt like she was floating. She had been in Wyoming for less than a year, and in that time she had lost her brother, gained 2 daughters, and found the man she was going to spend the rest of her life with. It was too much and not enough, all at once. "You look happy," Cole murmured into her hair. "I am. Happier than I have been in a very long time." "Good, because I'm about to make you even happier." He pulled back to look at her, his expression serious. "Or possibly very angry, depending on how you feel about what I'm going to say." Catherine's heart started to pound. "What is it?" Cole took a deep breath, then said in a rush, "Marry me. I know it has not been long, and I know you probably think I'm crazy, but I love you, Catherine. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you love those little girls. I love the way you bite your lip when you're thinking and the way you laugh at my terrible jokes. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to help you raise Emma and Eleanor. I want to have children with you, build a life with you, grow old with you. So please, Catherine Wells, will you marry me?" Catherine stared at him, her mind reeling. She should say it was too soon, that they barely knew each other, that she needed time to think. But the truth was that she did not need time. She knew exactly what she wanted, and what she wanted was standing in front of her with his heart in his eyes, waiting for her answer. "Yes," she said, and watched his face light up like a sunrise. "Yes, Cole Tanner, I will marry you." He kissed her right there in the middle of the dance floor in front of half the town, a kiss that left no doubt about his intentions or her acceptance. When they finally broke apart, the crowd around them was cheering and applauding, and Catherine laughed with joy and embarrassment. Mrs. Patterson appeared at her elbow, beaming. "I knew it! I told everyone you two were perfect for each other." "You also told everyone I was a desperate widow trying to trap a husband," Catherine pointed out. "Well, yes, but I was wrong about that. You are clearly a sensible woman making a good match, completely different." Mrs. Patterson patted her arm. "When is the wedding?" Catherine looked at Cole, who shrugged. "Up to you. I would marry you tomorrow if I could, but I know women like to plan these things." 2 weeks, Catherine said decisively. "I want to be married before the end of July." 2 weeks, Mrs. Patterson gasped. "But there is so much to do, the dress, the flowers, the food." 2 weeks, Catherine repeated firmly. "We do not need anything fancy, just the minister and some friends and a future together." Cole squeezed her hand. 2 weeks it is. The next 14 days passed in a blur of activity. Catherine made herself a simple but pretty dress from fabric she bought in town, using skills she had learned as a girl in Boston. Cole built an addition onto the cabin so there would be room for all of them, working from dawn until dusk with help from neighboring ranchers who had come to respect him. The twins were told they were going to have Uncle Cole living with them all the time, and they reacted with such joy that Catherine felt tears stream down her face. The wedding was held in the small church on the last Sunday in July, with half the territory in attendance. Catherine wore her new dress with wildflowers in her hair, and Cole wore the shirt she had bought him along with his best trousers. The twins stood beside them, holding hands and trying not to giggle, and when the minister pronounced them man and wife, Cole kissed her with such tenderness that Catherine felt her heart might burst. The celebration afterward was simple but joyful, with music and dancing and more food than they could possibly eat. Cole introduced her as his wife with such pride that Catherine felt like the most beautiful woman in the world, and when they finally left the party to go home, she felt like she was floating on air. Mrs. Murphy had agreed to keep the twins for the night, giving the newlyweds some privacy, and when they arrived at the cabin, Cole carried Catherine over the threshold as tradition demanded. He set her down gently in the main room, and they stood there for a moment, suddenly shy with each other despite all the kisses they had shared. "I love you," Cole said softly. "I know I told you that when I proposed, but I want to say it again now that we are married. I love you, Catherine Tanner." "I love you too," Catherine whispered, and it was the truest thing she had ever said. "I did not think I could feel this way, not after everything that happened, but you made me believe in happy endings again." "We are going to have so many happy endings," Cole promised. "This is just the first of many." He kissed her then, and the kiss deepened and became something more, something urgent and passionate and full of promise. They made their way to the bedroom, shedding clothes as they went, and when they finally came together, it was with a sense of rightness that Catherine had never experienced before. This was her husband, her partner, her love, and as they moved together in the darkness, she knew that she had found the place where she belonged. Later, as they lay tangled together in the sheets, Cole traced lazy patterns on her arm and said, "I have a confession to make." "Oh?" Catherine turned to look at him, propping herself up on one elbow. "This sounds serious." "It is. The day I first saw you trying to fix that fence, I told myself I was just being neighborly. But the truth is that I took one look at you, all fierce and determined with your hair falling down and dirt on your face, and I knew you were going to change my life." Catherine felt warmth spread through her chest. "I thought you were going to be another man trying to take advantage of a woman alone." "I know. You looked at me like I was a rattlesnake." Cole grinned. It was terrifying and attractive in equal measure. "I'm sorry I was so suspicious." "Do not be. You had every right to be cautious. I'm just glad you eventually gave me a chance." "I am glad too." Catherine kissed him softly. "You saved us. You know, the girls and me. We would have lost everything if not for you." "You saved yourself," Cole corrected. "I just helped a little. You are the strongest person I know, Catherine. Never forget that." They talked long into the night, making plans for the future. And when Catherine finally fell asleep in her husband's arms, she felt a peace she had not known since before Thomas died. The next morning they collected the twins from Mrs. Murphy, and when they walked into the cabin together as a family, Catherine knew that this was what happiness looked like. The months that followed were filled with hard work and joy. Cole moved his cattle onto Catherine's land, combining their two spreads into one larger, more profitable ranch. Catherine learned everything she could about ranching, becoming Cole's true partner in every sense of the word. The twins adjusted to having Cole as a permanent fixture in their lives, and soon it was hard to remember a time when he had not been there. In October, Catherine realized she was pregnant. She told Cole one evening after the girls had gone to bed, and the look of wonder on his face made her fall in love with him all over again. He placed his hand on her still flat stomach and said, "A baby. We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Catherine asked, suddenly nervous. "I know we have only been married a few months and we already have the girls to care for." "Happy? Catherine, I am over the moon. This is everything I ever wanted." He kissed her gently. "Thank you. Thank you for giving me this family, this life, this future." The twins were thrilled when they were told they were going to be big sisters, and they immediately began making plans for the new baby. Eleanor wanted a brother who could help with the ranch work, while Emma wanted a sister to play dolls with. Catherine listened to their chatter with amusement, one hand resting on her growing belly, and marveled at how much her life had changed in less than a year. The baby was born in May of 1877, a squalling, healthy boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's auburn hair. They named him Thomas, after Catherine's brother, and Cole cried when he held his son for the first time. The girls were fascinated by their new brother, hovering over him constantly and fighting over who got to hold him next. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Cole worked the ranch with skill and dedication, turning it into one of the most successful operations in the territory. Catherine managed the household and helped with the ranch work, and discovered she had a talent for breeding horses. The twins started school, riding into town every day with their lunch pails and slates, and came home full of stories about their friends and lessons. When Thomas was 2, Catherine became pregnant again, and this time they had a daughter they named Margaret, after the girl's mother. Eleanor and Emma, now 7, were old enough to be real helpers with the baby, and they took their responsibilities seriously. Cole expanded the cabin again, adding more bedrooms and a proper parlor, and Catherine planted roses by the front door, just like the ones her mother had grown in Boston. The years passed, marked by births and seasons and the steady growth of their family and their ranch. They had 2 more children, another boy named Cole Jr. and a girl named Sarah, and the cabin rang with the sound of children's laughter and the bustle of a busy household. Catherine sometimes looked around at her life and could hardly believe it was real. This abundance of love and family she had never expected to have. Emma and Eleanor grew into beautiful young women with memories of their birth parents, but a deep love for Catherine and Cole, who they called Ma and Pa without hesitation. They helped on the ranch, learned to be skilled horsewomen, and eventually married good men from neighboring spreads. Catherine cried at both weddings, overwhelmed by the reminder of how far they had all come. On a warm evening in the summer of 1891, Catherine sat on the porch with Cole, watching their younger children play in the yard. Thomas was 14 now, already showing signs of becoming the man he would be, tall and strong with a good head for business. Margaret was 11, sweet and shy like Emma had been. Cole Jr. was 8, all energy and mischief, and Sarah was 5, following her older siblings everywhere with determination. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Catherine asked, leaning against her husband's shoulder. "If you had not stopped that day to help me with the fence?" Cole wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "All the time. I think about how close I came to riding past to minding my own business, and then I think about what I would have missed, and it makes me cold inside." "I was so angry when you insisted on helping," Catherine said with a laugh. "I was determined to do everything myself, to prove I did not need anyone." You were magnificent, all fire and pride and determination. I fell in love with you right then, even though I did not realize it yet. I did not realize I loved you until you kissed me that first time. And then I was terrified because it was too soon, too fast, too everything. Best decision I ever made, pushing you to let me court you. Cole kissed the top of her head. Marrying you was like finding the other half of my soul. Catherine turned to look at her husband. 15 years of marriage had added some gray to his dark hair and lines around his eyes, but to her he was as handsome as the day they met. I used to think losing Thomas was the worst thing that could ever happen to me. And it was terrible, losing him and Margaret. But if they had not died, I would never have come to Wyoming. I would never have met you. And I know Thomas would not want me to spend my life mourning what could have been. He would want me to be happy, to love these children, to build this life. He would be proud of you, Cole said firmly. Proud of the mother you became to his daughters, proud of the ranch you built, proud of everything you have accomplished. We built, Catherine corrected. None of this would have been possible without you. We make a good team. The best team? Catherine stood up, pulling Cole to his feet. Come on, let us go for a walk before supper. I want to see the sunset over the mountains. They walked hand in hand across the land they had built together. Past the cattle grazing peacefully, past the corrals full of fine horses, past the garden that produced more vegetables than they could eat. The sun was setting in a blaze of gold and crimson, painting the mountains in shades of fire, and Catherine thought about the scared young woman who had arrived here 15 years ago, desperate and alone and terrified of the future. That woman had learned to be strong, had learned to accept help, had learned to love again. She had raised 2 little girls who had lost everything, had built a successful ranch against all odds, had created a family that was loud and chaotic and perfect, and she had done it all with the help of a cowboy who had stopped one day to fix a fence and ended up fixing her broken heart. What are you thinking about? Cole asked, squeezing her hand. Happy ending, Catherine said, smiling up at him. And new beginnings, and how grateful I am for both. Me too. Cole pulled her close, and they stood together watching the sun sink below the horizon. 2 people who had found each other in the wilderness and built a love that would last for all their days. Years continued to unfold with the gentle rhythm of a life well lived. The ranch prospered beyond even Cole's ambitious expectations, becoming known throughout Wyoming territory for its quality cattle and fine horses. Catherine's breeding program produced animals that ranchers came from hundreds of miles to purchase, and she became respected in her own right, not just as Cole Tanner's wife, but as a skilled horsewoman and businesswoman. Emma married first at 19 to a young rancher named Daniel Mitchell, who had been courting her for 2 years. The wedding was held at the ranch, with tables set up outside and the entire community invited. Catherine watched her niece, now truly her daughter in every way that mattered, exchange vows with a good man, and felt a bittersweet mix of joy and sorrow. Thomas and Margaret would have loved to see this day, but Catherine knew they were watching from somewhere, proud of the woman their daughter had become. Eleanor married 6 months later, choosing a man named Jack Peterson, who worked as the foreman on a neighboring spread. She was more impulsive than her sister, always had been, and her courtship was fast and passionate. But Jack was solid and dependable, and he looked at Eleanor like she hung the moon, which was all Catherine needed to know. Both couples settled within riding distance, and soon Catherine had grandchildren to spoil. Emma had a son first, a chubby baby with his mother's sweet disposition, and Eleanor followed with twin girls, which made everyone laugh at the poetry of it. The ranch became the center of family gatherings, with children running everywhere and multiple generations sitting down to meals together. Thomas, their eldest son, showed no interest in marrying young. He was focused on learning everything he could about ranching, talking seriously with Cole about expansion and breeding stock and market prices. At 16, he could work alongside any grown man, and Cole relied on him more and more as a true partner. Catherine watched her son become a man and felt pride swell in her chest. This was Thomas's legacy, this strong, capable boy who carried his uncle's name. Margaret was gentler, more interested in books and music than cattle and horses. Cole built her a small library in one corner of the expanded cabin, and she spent hours there reading everything she could get her hands on. Catherine ordered books from the East, anything she thought her daughter might enjoy, and watched with satisfaction as Margaret's mind grew and expanded. Not every child needed to be a rancher, and Catherine was determined that all of her children would have choices. Cole Jr. was the wild one, always getting into scrapes, always pushing boundaries, but with such charm and good humor that it was hard to stay angry with him. He reminded Catherine of the stories Cole told about his own youth, and she suspected her husband secretly enjoyed his son's adventurous spirit, even when it meant patching up cuts and bruises from the latest mishap. Sarah was the baby, spoiled by everyone, and she grew into a confident little girl who knew exactly what she wanted and how to get it. She had Catherine's auburn hair and Cole's gray eyes, and she used both to devastating effect. By the time she was 8, she could ride as well as her brothers and shoot better than most men, and she announced regularly that she was going to be the best rancher in Wyoming when she grew up. In the spring of 1895, Catherine received a letter from her aunt in Boston, the same aunt she had written to nearly 20 years earlier to explain that she would not be returning. The aunt was elderly now and wanted to see Catherine one last time before she passed. Catherine debated making the trip, worried about leaving the ranch and the children, but Cole insisted. "You need to go," he said firmly. "She is your family, and you should say goodbye properly. Thomas is old enough to help me run things, and Margaret can manage the household. We will be fine for a few weeks." So Catherine made the long journey east, traveling by train for the first time in 2 decades. Boston looked different than she remembered, more crowded and industrial, the streets filled with trolley cars and the noise of progress. Her aunt's house, once so grand in her memory, seemed small and cramped after the wide-open spaces of Wyoming, but seeing her aunt was worth the trip. The old woman cried when Catherine walked through the door, embracing her with trembling arms and exclaiming over how beautiful she had become. They spent 2 weeks together talking about family history and Catherine's life in the West. Her aunt wanted to hear every detail about the ranch, the children, Cole, and the life Catherine had built. "I worried about you so much," the aunt confessed one afternoon over tea. "When you wrote that you were staying in that wild place to raise your brother's children, I thought you were throwing your life away. I thought you would end up alone and bitter, struggling to survive." "I did struggle," Catherine admitted. "Those first few months were the hardest of my life. But then Cole came along and everything changed. He taught me that asking for help is not weakness, and that love can heal even the deepest wounds." "You truly love him, do not you?" her aunt said, studying her face. "It is written all over you." "I do. More than I ever thought possible." Catherine smiled, thinking of her husband back home. "He is my partner, my best friend, my great love. I cannot imagine my life without him." "Then I am happy for you, my dear. You deserve all the joy you have found." Catherine returned to Wyoming with a lighter heart, having made peace with the last remaining piece of her past. When she stepped off the train, Cole was waiting for her, and she ran into his arms like a girl, not caring who saw them. He held her tight and whispered, "I missed you every single day." "I missed you too. Do not ever make me leave again." "Never," he promised. "You belong here, with me, forever." The children had grown even in the few weeks she had been gone, or so it seemed to Catherine's eyes. Thomas had turned 18 while she was away, and Cole had given him his own section of land to manage. Margaret, at 15, had organized the household with frightening efficiency, proving she had more of her mother's steel than anyone had realized. Cole Jr. had broken his arm falling out of a tree, which surprised no one, and Sarah had won a ribbon at the county fair for her horse riding skills. Life continued its steady march forward. Emma and Eleanor both had more children, expanding the family in wonderful ways. Young Thomas fell in love with a rancher's daughter from the next county, a smart, capable woman named Alice who could rope and brand as well as any man. They married when Thomas was 20, and Alice moved to the ranch, fitting into the family as if she had always been there. Margaret surprised everyone by announcing at 17 that she wanted to be a teacher. There was no school close enough for her to attend normal school, so Catherine made arrangements for her daughter to study with a teacher in Cheyenne. It meant Margaret living away from home for the first time, and Catherine cried the day they took her to the train, but she was proud beyond measure that her daughter had dreams beyond the ranch. Cole Jr. settled down somewhat as he got older, channeling his energy into training horses. He had a gift for it, a natural understanding of what made an animal tick, and soon he was handling the most difficult horses with ease. Catherine watched him work and saw glimpses of the man he would become. Still wild around the edges, but with a good heart underneath. Sarah, true to her word, became an excellent rancher. By the time she was 16, she could negotiate prices as shrewdly as her father, and buyers learned quickly not to try to cheat her. She had no interest in the traditional feminine pursuits that had occupied most young women her age, preferring to spend her days in the saddle checking fences and counting cattle. In 1903, Catherine turned 50. Cole threw her a party, inviting what seemed like half of Wyoming, and Catherine found herself surrounded by children and grandchildren and friends she had known for decades. She looked around at the celebration, at the ranch that had grown from a struggling homestead into a thriving operation, at the family that had expanded from 2 scared little girls into multiple generations, and felt overwhelmed by gratitude. Cole found her standing alone for a moment, watching the festivities, and wrapped his arms around her from behind. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything. How far we have come. How blessed we are." Catherine leaned back against him, solid and warm as he had always been. "Do you remember that first day when you stopped to help me with the fence?" "Of course. Best day of my life, even though I did not know it yet." "I was so angry with you," Catherine said with a laugh, "so determined to do everything myself." "And I was so determined to help you, even though you clearly did not want it. Good thing I am as stubborn as you are." "We are a matched pair, that is for certain." Catherine turned in his arms to face him. "Thank you, Cole, for everything, for helping me when I needed it most, for loving me and the girls, for building this life with me. I could not have done any of it without you." "Yes, you could have. You are the strongest person I know." Cole kissed her softly. "But I am glad you did not have to do it alone. We were meant to be partners, you and I, 2 halves of one whole." "Partners," Catherine agreed, "always and forever." The party continued around them, but for that moment it was just the 2 of them. The woman who had come to Wyoming broken and desperate, and the man who had helped her heal. They had built something remarkable together, not just a successful ranch, but a family, a legacy, a love story that would be told for generations. As the sun set on that spring evening in 1903, Catherine looked at her husband of 26 years and thought about the question Emma had asked all those years ago. "Is that man going to be our new papa?" She had said no at the time, had insisted they did not need a papa. But Emma, in her 4-year-old wisdom, had been right. They had needed Cole, desperately, and he had needed them just as much. Cole Tanner had stopped one day to help a woman fix a fence, and in doing so had fixed so much more. He had given a grieving woman hope, 2 orphaned girls a father, and himself a family to love. It was a simple act of kindness that had changed the course of multiple lives, proving that sometimes the smallest gestures have the biggest impacts. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and sorrows, new challenges and triumphs. Catherine and Cole grew old together, their hair turning white, their faces lined with the marks of a life well lived. They watched their children have children, and those children have children, until the family tree they had planted together spread its branches wide. Margaret became a renowned teacher, eventually opening her own school in the growing town nearby. She married late to a professor she met at a teaching conference and had 2 children who inherited her love of learning. Cole Jr. married a woman as wild as he was, and they traveled the West together buying and selling horses, always coming home to the ranch between adventures. Sarah took over running the ranch when Thomas and Alice moved to their own spread, proving that she was every bit as capable as she had always claimed. Emma and Eleanor, the little girls whose tragedy had brought Catherine to Wyoming in the first place, became the matriarchs of their own families, respected members of the community, mothers and grandmothers who passed down the stories of their aunt and uncle's great love. They never forgot their birth parents, but they honored them by living full and happy lives, by being good mothers to their own children, by continuing the legacy of love and family that Thomas and Margaret had started. On a cold December evening in 1910, Catherine and Cole sat by the fire in the cabin that had been expanded so many times it was now more of a ranch house. Their youngest grandchild, a boy of 3, was asleep on Cole's lap, and Catherine was knitting a blanket for another grandchild expected in the spring. The house was quiet, most of the family having gone home after the Sunday dinner that had become a tradition. "Do you ever regret it?" Catherine asked suddenly. "Marrying me, I mean. Taking on a ready-made family instead of starting fresh with a younger woman who could have given you a different life?" Cole looked at her like she had grown a second head. "Catherine Tanner, in all our years together, that is the most foolish thing you have ever said. Regret you? Regret our children, our grandchildren, this life we built? Never. Not for one single second. I just wonder sometimes if you got what you wanted, if I was enough." Cole carefully shifted the sleeping child into a more comfortable position and reached for Catherine's hand. His grip was not as strong as it once was, arthritis having stiffened his joints, but it was still warm and sure. "You listened to me. That day I stopped to help you with the fence. I thought I was just being neighborly, paying back a debt to your brother. But the truth is that I needed you just as much as you needed me. I was 30 years old, and I had never felt that spark, that connection with anyone. I had resigned myself to being alone, and then I saw you, all fierce and determined and beautiful, and my entire world shifted. I was not beautiful. I was sweaty and dirty and desperate. You were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. You still are." Cole squeezed her hand. "Every single day with you has been a gift. Every laugh, every tear, every fight, every moment of joy. You gave me Emma and Eleanor to love, and then you gave me Thomas and Margaret and Cole Jr. and Sarah. You gave me a purpose, a family, a reason to wake up excited every morning. You gave me everything that matters. So no, I do not regret one single thing about marrying you. You are my life, Catherine. You always have been." Catherine felt tears slide down her cheeks, and she did not bother to wipe them away. After all these years, this man could still make her cry with his words, could still make her feel like the most cherished woman in the world. "I love you. I do not say it enough, but I love you more than I can express. I know, and I love you too. To the moon and back," as Sarah used to say when she was little. They sat together in comfortable silence, the fire crackling, the child sleeping peacefully, and Catherine thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. She had come to Wyoming broken and lost, a woman raising her brother's children without complaint because it was the right thing to do, the only thing to do. And then a cowboy had ridden into her life and said those simple, powerful words, "Let me help you." Those words had changed everything. They had opened the door to a partnership, a love, a family that had become the foundation of Catherine's entire existence. Cole had helped her fix a fence, but he had done so much more than that. He had helped her fix her broken heart, had helped her build a new life from the ashes of tragedy, had helped her become the woman she was meant to be. And she had helped him too. She had given him the family he had always wanted, had been his partner in building one of the most successful ranches in Wyoming, had loved him with a fierceness that never wavered. They had saved each other, these two souls who had found each other in the vastness of the frontier. In the spring of 1912, Cole took sick with pneumonia. It started as a simple cold, but at 63, his body did not fight it off as well as it once would have. Catherine nursed him tirelessly, sitting by his bedside, bathing his fevered brow, praying to a God she had sometimes doubted for the life of the man she loved more than her own breath. The children came, all of them filling the house with worry and love. Emma and Eleanor sat on either side of the bed, holding the hands of the man who had been more of a father to them than their birth father had ever had the chance to be. Thomas, named for Catherine's brother, stood at the foot of the bed with his jaw clenched, refusing to believe that the strongest man he had ever known could be felled by something as simple as illness. But Cole was tough and stubborn, and not ready to leave his family. He fought the illness with the same determination he had brought to everything else in his life, and slowly, painfully, he began to recover. Catherine never left his side, and when he finally opened his eyes and smiled at her, she collapsed against his chest and sobbed with relief. "You cannot leave me," she said fiercely. "We have more grandchildren to meet, more years to live. You do not get to go anywhere without me, do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," Cole said, his voice weak but amused. "Would not dream of it." He recovered fully, though it took months, and left him frailer than before, but the sickness seemed to remind everyone of the preciousness of time, and the family made more of an effort to be together, to create memories while they still could. Catherine and Cole marked their 40th anniversary in July of 1916, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a testament to the love they had built together. The world was changing around them. The frontier was closing. Wyoming had become a state. Automobiles were replacing horses on many roads. But at the ranch, time moved at its own pace, measured in seasons and births and the eternal rhythms of the land. Catherine and Cole, now in their 60s, had handed over most of the daily operations to their children, but they were still involved, still contributing, still very much a part of the life they had created. On a golden afternoon in the fall of 1918, Catherine and Cole took a ride together, something they had done less frequently as they aged. They rode to the spot where Cole had first stopped to help Catherine with the fence, where this entire story had begun 42 years earlier. The fence was long gone, replaced by more modern structures, but Catherine could still picture exactly where she had been standing that day, desperate and alone, and trying so hard to be strong. "I was terrified," she said, dismounting and walking to the spot. "Terrified of failing, of losing the ranch, of not being good enough for Emma and Eleanor. I did not know how I was going to survive." Cole came to stand beside her, his arm around her waist. "But you did survive. You more than survived. You thrived. Because of you. Because you stopped and offered to help a stranger. You were never a stranger. From the moment I saw you, I knew you were important. I did not know you would become my whole world, but I knew you mattered." Catherine leaned her head against her husband's shoulder, looking out over the land they had worked together for so many years. "If I could go back and talk to that terrified woman, I would tell her that everything is going to be all right, that the cowboy who stops to fix her fence is going to become the love of her life, that the 2 little girls she is raising without complaint are going to grow up to be wonderful women, that she is going to have more children and grandchildren and a life so full of love it will sometimes overwhelm her. I would tell her to trust in the future, to accept help when it is offered, and to believe that happy endings really do exist." "What would you tell the cowboy?" Cole asked. "I would tell him thank you. Thank you for stopping. Thank you for seeing past my pride to the need underneath. Thank you for loving me and my family. Thank you for every day, every moment, every memory. Thank you for being exactly who you are." Cole turned her to face him, his gray eyes still sharp despite his age. "Catherine Tanner, you have been the greatest adventure of my life. Every day with you has been a privilege. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." "Even the hard parts? The sick children, the failed crops, the money worries?" "Especially the hard parts. Those are what made us strong together. Those are what proved that our love could survive anything." He kissed her softly. "I have no regrets, my love. Not a single one." They rode back to the ranch as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The house was lit up, smoke coming from the chimney, and Catherine could see figures moving inside. Their family, gathered for Sunday dinner as they did every week, without fail. This was what they had built, this legacy of love and connection that would outlast them both. Catherine and Cole lived for several more years, seeing their great-grandchildren grow, watching the ranch continue to prosper under Sarah's capable management. They grew old together with grace and dignity, never losing the connection that had defined their relationship from the start. Even when Cole's hearing started to go and Catherine's eyesight dimmed, they could still communicate with a touch, a look, the deep understanding that came from 47 years of partnership. Cole passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1923, 2 months after his 74th birthday. Catherine woke to find him cold beside her, and though she knew he had lived a long and full life, the pain of losing him was as sharp as any knife. He had been her rock, her partner, her great love, and the world felt wrong without him in it. The funeral was enormous, attended by people from all over Wyoming who had known Cole Tanner as a fair rancher, a good neighbor, a man of his word. But to Catherine, he was simply her husband, the cowboy who had stopped one day to help her and ended up giving her a lifetime of love. She lived for 5 more years without him, surrounded by children and grandchildren who made sure she was never alone. But everyone could see that part of her had died with Cole, that she was merely waiting for the day when she could join him. She spent her final years sitting on the porch of the ranch house, looking out over the land they had built together, telling stories to anyone who would listen about the man who had been her everything. Catherine Wells Tanner passed away in her sleep on a spring morning in 1928, 3 months after her 75th birthday. She was laid to rest beside Cole, under a large oak tree on a hill overlooking the ranch. The headstone read simply, "Beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She loved without complaint. He helped without question. Together they built a legacy of love." Emma and Eleanor, now in their 50s, and grandmothers themselves, stood at their aunt's grave and wept for the woman who had raised them, who had loved them, who had given up her own life to make sure theirs were full and happy. They remembered the scared young woman who had taken them in after their parents died, who had worked herself to exhaustion to give them a home, who had found love in the most unexpected place and built a family that now numbered in the dozens. "She would be proud of us," Emma said, taking her sister's hand. "Proud of our families, our lives, everything we have built." "She would be proud of all of us," Eleanor agreed, "and she would want us to remember that love is what matters. Not money or land or success, but love. That is what she and Uncle Cole taught us." The family gathered after the funeral, filling the ranch house as they had done so many times before. They told stories about Catherine and Cole, about the early days of struggle and the later years of prosperity, about the love that had sustained them through everything. The younger generations listened with wonder, amazed by the tale of their ancestors who had started with nothing and built something remarkable. Sarah, now 51 and running the ranch with the same determination her mother had shown, stood up and raised a glass. "To Mama and Papa," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "They taught us what it means to love, to work, to build something that lasts. They showed us that family is not just about blood, but about choice, about commitment, about showing up every single day and doing the work. This ranch, this family, this legacy is their gift to us. Let us honor them by living as they did, with courage and love and an open hand to anyone who needs help." "To Mama and Papa," everyone echoed, and the words rang through the house like a benediction. The ranch continued to thrive for generations, passed down through Sarah's line, and then to her children and grandchildren. The story of Catherine and Cole became family legend, told and retold until it took on the qualities of myth. The woman who came from Boston to raise her brother's children, the cowboy who stopped to fix a fence and stayed for a lifetime, the love that grew from tragedy into something beautiful and lasting. Even now, more than a century later, descendants of Catherine and Cole still work the land in Wyoming, still run cattle and breed horses, still gather for Sunday dinners and tell the old stories. They remember the woman who raised her brother's twin girls without complaint, and the cowboy who said, "Let me help you," and they teach their own children that the greatest legacy is not money or land, but love. Because in the end, that is what Catherine and Cole left behind. Not just a successful ranch or a large family, but a blueprint for how to love well, how to help generously, how to build a life worth living. They proved that sometimes the worst tragedies can lead to the greatest joys, that accepting help is not weakness, but wisdom, and that true love, once found, can weather any storm and last beyond death itself. Their love story started with a woman trying to fix a fence and a man offering to help. It grew into a partnership that built a thriving ranch, raised 6 children, and created a family dynasty that lasted for generations. It was a love story worthy of the Wild West, full of hard work and determination, heartbreak and triumph, but most of all full of the simple, powerful truth that love, freely given and gratefully received, can change everything. And somewhere, in whatever place souls go after this life ends, Catherine and Cole are together still, their hands clasped, their hearts intertwined, their love eternal as the mountains that watched over their ranch for all those years. They did more than survive the hardships of frontier life. They thrived, they loved, they built something that lasted, and that in the end is the very best kind of happy ending.